Now, they say change is the only constant in the universe. But we as humans often don't have the right skill set to properly deal with unexpected or even planned changes. Now, in the book, The First 30 Days, author Ariane de Bonvoisin shares her 9 principles of change with the world, and she joins us live from Cape Town this morning for our weekly book slot to talk a little bit about the book, but also to tell us a little bit about change. Very good morning, Ariane. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Eben. Lovely to be here.
I want to ask you about change and comfort zones and how the two kind of fit together.
Yeah. Well, I think all change is an invitation to get out of your comfort zone. I think, we grow up and we don't want things to change. I think change is the most important life skill. Change is the word of the year. It's the word of the decade. And yet what I've found, I've interviewed over 1,000 people all around the world. It's pretty normal what people say to me. They say that change is hard. I hate change. I feel overwhelmed with change. I don't know how to change. And so there's this constant resistance and pushback to what life might be bringing to you right now. And I think change is asking us to look differently at our careers or our finances or our relationships or our health very often or our families. And, my hope with this book was really to look at why is it that everyone finds change so hard when it is the most expected thing that's going to happen to us. So I wanted to find ways of making change easier. And I think through these interviews, I've found these principles where there are people who are really good at change. There are people who can handle a change. There are people who will initiate a change. And yet some people aren't. So that was my hope with this book and releasing it now in South Africa.
Now, you've appeared on all the big shows all around the world. What's been the reaction to the book so far?
The reaction's been very positive because, as I said, most people are really struggling with change. If you think about it, most people are in 3 or 4 categories. They're either handling a life change right now or doing the best they can. They might be going through a divorce. They might have lost their job. They might be getting married, being pregnant. They might be losing a job and starting a business, for example. And I think, those people, they're doing the best they can, but they don't necessarily have the skills. I think there's another category of people who are thinking about a change. They might be thinking about losing weight or thinking about quitting smoking or thinking about going back to school to study something. And there's a third category of people that I've met and interviewed that are people who are helping other people with a change. It might be a child, it might be a parent who's aging or has some sort of health challenge. There's also a 4th category of change that I found over my research, which is there's a lot of people who are just waiting for someone else to change, as opposed to actually taking self-responsibility for themselves. So whether it's a spouse or a teenager or your boss, you're waiting for someone else to change. But I find, everyone you meet is in some sort of area of change right now. And I think the hope with this book is to give people a little bit of assistance, because schools don't teach us to change, the places we work don't teach us to change, even our parents. For parents out there, please teach your children about change, because when they head out into the world, that really is what they're going to be encountering every day.
Into the 21st century, the modern human being, is it a question of almost celebrating changing every day, refreshing yourself, staying new?
I think asking people to celebrate some of the tough changes is a big stretch. I mean, one of the principles that I found, which is one of my favorites, is something that I call the change guarantee. And from all the people I met, I always ask them one question, even the hard changes that you really don't want to imagine. I said, was there anything good that came from this change? Was there something that you can point to that actually after time was positive? And I was surprised how many people said yes to that question. And so the change guarantee principle, which is principle number 2 in the book, states that from this change, something good will come. From this situation, something good will come. And I ask people, I say, think back to some of the tough changes you've been through and sort of go back and look at some of the positive that came from that. Write down that principle. Write it down by your phone, in your car, where you work, because change is going to happen and is going to come. And in some ways, it's quite predictably there. and yet we act as if it's never going to happen. So I find if you help people be a little bit more prepared that it's coming, and the minute you focus the mind on there's going to be something good that comes, you know, you always get what you focus on eventually.
We get what we deserve in life, in a way, I suppose. Now, you're a very impressive person. You've got an MBA, you're an accomplished athlete, you've traveled the world, worked in dozens and dozens of countries. How did it all point you to write this book?
I thought you were going to say, how did it all point to me coming finally back to South Africa? Which is another good question. You know, I had sort of been in the corporate world. I lived in New York City for 15 years. And I'd climbed this very high ladder. I was doing a very different type of work. I was in finance. I was investing in internet companies. And as successful as I was, the higher I climbed that ladder, the less happy I was. And I realized that I'd climbed the wrong ladder, or it was, you know, the wrong ladder leaning up against the wrong wall. And it takes a lot of courage to sort of realize you're in the wrong job or you're in the wrong relationship. So after a couple of years and, you know, a lot of sort of faith and belief that it was going to be okay to jump into the unknown, which is really what change is about always, I finally left that sort of career. And I think what was most missing to me in my life was I wanted to give back. I wanted to feel like my life had some meaning. I was contributing to something important. And so I started interviewing people who were in some form of life change, because my passion was really to go, there must be ways of making things easier. And the hope for that book was to go, there really are. They are what I call these 9 principles that are they're simple, they're basic, and they apply to anyone of any age, any religion, background, culture. That's the excitement about the book.
It's a brilliant book, and I think it's going to change my world a little bit, because I think I fit in all your categories, Ariane. But thank you very much for joining us. That is Ariane de Bonvoisin. She wrote an exceptional book about change. The only constant in the universe is change. If you want to become better, you have to change. If you want to lose weight, you have to change. If you want more money, you have to change. You have to change. Change is good.